Today, not only do I have a very exciting author with me, but she also shares the same name as me. So, Allison, welcome to One of Us is Talking. How are
Thank
you
you.
doing today?
Today's pretty good. How are you?
I'm good. I mean, the weather is better here today than it was yesterday. We had a lot of rain, so it's kind of
Yes.
sunny today. So that's a lot better.
Remind me where you're located.
I'm in New Jersey.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
How about you? Where are you located?
So I'm in Nebraska, and
Oh, wow.
yeah, we've had unseasonably kind of cool weather since the 4th, which is I really enjoyed. But today I can tell it's warming up and it's humid. So yeah.
Oh my gosh, Nebraska. Okay, so we're kind of far
Mhm.
apart, but at least we're both
We are.
having like good weather. So
Yeah.
that I don't know, like I was saying, it was raining a lot here, and we also had, I don't know if you guys had this, the Canadian wildfire smog. It was,
Not as bad as y'all, but we've had some come down. Yeah.
oh my God, it was like yellow. It was so creepy. I mean, I don't even know how we got I got onto that topic, but I mean, Allison, thank you so much for joining me today. If you wanted to introduce yourself a little bit and talk about your debut novel.
Sure. So I'm Allison Bitz, and as I said, I'm from Nebraska. And my debut novel is called The Unstoppable Bridget Bloom. It came out on May 2nd with Harper Teen, which is part of HarperCollins. And I don't know how much detail to really go into because I know we'll talk more about it as we get going. But the quick summary is that Bridget is 16 and actually she's from rural Nebraska like I am, and she just doesn't really fit in her hometown, and she's bullied. Actually, you can kind of see that in the book, but doesn't really. I don't know that Bridget really sees it that way, and she knows she's destined for bigger and better things. She really, really wants to be on Broadway. Kind of sees it as her destiny, and her dreams come true when she's admitted to this prestigious high school boarding school in Chicago, which is known for producing people right out of high school to go on to Broadway with their music program. But when she arrives at school, she gets the information that she's not actually admitted to the music focused program, which is hugely problematic for Bridget because music and performing is really all she's ever wanted to do. And so, the main theme of the book is when you have this thing that makes you you, or that is like the majority of your identity, and then you aren't able to do it, what then do you do? So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that theme, let alone, is such a heavy one and kind of challenging one to deal with. And then Bridget in the book goes through a lot. So where did you get this idea for the unstoppable Bridget Bloom? Where did that come from?
So it's kind of I guess I think it's a funny story because it's mine, but uh when I went to pen Bridget, I was kind of looking for something actually that would make me laugh because I'd just written something that I felt was like very kind of hard and serious, and I just wanted something light and fun to write. And so I was looking into my own youth and thinking, well, what were things that brought me a lot of joy, as I was growing up? And music was a huge, huge thing in my youth. And then actually, so The Little Mermaid. So this book has really loose retelling underpinnings actually in The Little Mermaid. It just really kind of, it was the seed of an idea that took off from there. But so yeah, it was kind of this combination of what will bring me joy, and is there anything I can do with like this loose fairy tale, and that's what happened.
That's so cool, especially that you were able to kind of tie it to a fairy tale, but so loosely. Like
Yeah,
you really wouldn't be able to see it, but it's still there.
I
That's
don't.
awesome.
Yeah, I don't think most people do see it unless I say it. And I mean, the main theme that remains is like we have a we have a girl who's gone to a place she really really wants to go, but the cost is her voice. And so that part remains. And then some of the names, if you when you can see it, like there's Hans, who Hans Christian Andersen wrote the
Ah,
original Little Mermaid. There's Anderson Hall was mentioned. Seabass the teacher, who was kind of like a loose play on Sebastian the crab. So it's there, but it's so loose.
yes, but I feel like even though it's still loose, a lot of research had to go into this book before kind of putting it forward and really getting to start to work. So, what kind of research do you put into your novels as you're writing them or as you're thinking of ideas?
Yeah, when I saw that you're going to ask that question, I was like, oh, that's a really great question. I think for me, it really varies novel to novel, like where are the big gaps in what I want to write about and what I don't know. For Bridget, like a lot of it was created. So I did do some research on, okay, are there boarding schools like this? And there are. And then if so, like how are they structured? Because the school that I made at Richard James Academy is a fake school, but I wanted it to be realistic. And so I looked at a few schools that are like that around the country to kind of get an idea of like what what might a day look like and what kind of classes do they have and what kinds of different programs are offered within one school. And so that was definitely some research that I did. Um, and then the majority of it from memory is like I had to really reacquaint myself with music theory because I don't get too deep into it because that's a whole language in and of itself that I used to speak fluently, but I don't anymore. And so I really had to dive in. And then there's sheet music in the book that I wrote, and I really had to like get back into my music roots to remember how to do that. That was definitely the hardest part was that darn sheet music. but but yeah, that I think that was the majority of the research that went into this particular book.
I think it's so crazy how even if you're just writing like a fun little story, there's still some sort of research that has to go into it. And I mean, you did a fantastic job and all that research really paid off. But what about your writing process, like specifically for this book? So, what was the process behind the Unstoppable Bridget Bloom? And like, where did you start? Where did you end? What did you have to go back and fill in?
Yeah, so writing for I know every author's journey is very different. But it seems like when I talk to different authors, the consensus is, wow, do we revise a lot, you know? And so the drafting with Bridget was kind of fast and furious. I had the idea and I could like hear her, I could hear this character, her voice and how she would carry herself in the world, probably the most of any main character I've ever, or the most of any main character I've ever written. And so when I had the bones of what the story was going to be like, I just sat down and drafted. And I think I drafted the whole first draft in like 60 days.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
yeah, I was like obsessed. It was like I wanted to read this book, so I had to write the book.
Mhm.
And I was also writing during, do you know National Novel Writing Month, NaNoWriMo? Like,
Oh, I've heard about it.
yeah. So the official National Novel Writing Month is November, but then they have this thing called Camp National Novel Writing Month in I think it's April maybe. And so I was participating, and so that helped me be ambitious and set goals and kind of have a community of other people who were writing a lot at the same time. So I wrote the first I think 50 or 60,000 words during that month, and then the last 20 or so the next month. Um, then from there, it just honestly, the book sat in the drawer for, I wrote it in 2018 and it sat for 3 years because my first agent who I sent the book to didn't like the book. She didn't think it was the right brand for me. And so I continued to write different books with her and none of those sold, unfortunately. And so then when I parted ways and started with it, I was querying new agents. I thought, I'm going to give this book a whirl. I'm going to see where it can go. And signed with a new agent and then it sold and then revised it a few more times, once with my agent and then some things with my editor. And so it's kind of this constant process of honing and sharpening different arcs. And I added more max into latter drafts because there wasn't enough on page max, which was an edit that I really agreed with. And then in the original iterations too, the school they didn't write their own musical, and they were doing they were actually doing Legally Blonde.
Okay.
Yeah, and my agent had the idea, well, why don't you have them write a musical? And I was like, are you kidding? You're going to make me write a book where kids are writing a musical? That means I'm like writing a musical, kind of. But I actually do think that was for the best, to make all these students come together, right? To write something as a group like that. Um, so yeah, I guess I don't know if that's what you're asking with writing process,
No,
but
definitely like seeing how that kind of got like mapped out. And I think it's crazy that you wrote this book back in 2018 and
I
it just
know.
kind of sat. And even as you were talking, I'm like, you're really the type of person to look at where never give up on like something that you have written or created, because who would have thought yours ended up
Yeah,
getting published years later? And I mean, it was for the best, kind of your path in a way.
yeah, yeah. I think that's definitely my call to all authors. Like if you've got work that didn't go anywhere right now, just save it. You never know because, 3 years later when I queried, it did really well. That was 2021. And then the first book that I acquired an agent with in 2017, that's going to be my book too. So sometimes your books that you set in the drawer have a different life in them. So save everything.
Yeah, I mean, never delete anything,
No.
because I even know I'm a screenwriter, and there's
Oh,
sometimes where
cool.
like I just want to like delete something or completely can it, but it's never worth to lose all your work, even if it's just 500 words, because
Right.
as we saw with you, it really came to be something.
Yes. And I love, like, I think for screenwriting too, like, I don't know a lot about screenwriting, but like, I can imagine that maybe sometimes there's some really awesome dialogue that you have to cut for whatever reason, but that might go somewhere else, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. Exactly. So it is really hard when you're like looking at something and you have to put it to the side or cut it, but never get rid of it because it
Yeah.
can fit somewhere. And I mean, your whole journey with this was just so, it seems like even how you wrote it in 2 months, like it just kind of, this whole thing seems like it was so meant to be. And you have your debut novel out there. So I have to ask, how has your debut month, the 2 months been? Have they been like kind of hectic?
Yeah, they're hectic. That's a good word for it. It's like I think a lot of authors were warning me for years. They were like, "Okay, I know this is what you wanted. Like you've worked so hard for this, and it's going to be amazing." And then you're going to have this moment of like, kind of like crash. And my experience was kind of like that. It was I'd gone to the around my actual launch date, I had gone to Boston to celebrate my good friend Joan F. Smith debuted her second novel, The Other Side of Infinity. So her book came out the week before mine did, like the Tuesday before, because usually books launch on Tuesdays.
Oh, okay.
So I was in Boston and then I stayed and did kind of like a pop-up launch thing with her and my other critique partner, Laura Taylor Namey, in New York. And so that was really cool, but also like really exhausting because I don't like know New York and just making sure like my whole family came. So I'm just making sure everybody was like in the right place and everybody was like happy and having a good time. That was a lot. And then I came home and did like a launch with my like hometown community, like back in Lincoln on that weekend. And that was a lot more relaxing and really, really fun. So the launch itself was hectic and good mostly. And then I had a revision due to my editor on book 2 weeks after all my launch stuff happened.
Oh
So
my God.
like I didn't really have time to crash. I basically like launched and like went right back to my laptop constantly. But then at the end of May when I had that send off, I feel like I did just kind of like flop. I was tired. I'm still kind of tired. Um, so it is kind of what other authors said. It's joyous and then it's also like, oh my gosh, it's over. And it almost feels kind of like postpartum depression a little bit, like the baby's in the world and you
Yeah.
know, now you're learning a different way of life.
I mean, I can only imagine too being in New York for that kind of like release party, when New York, even for someone who goes there all the time, it is so confusing. And
Yeah,
it's
and I
so
and I
good.
don't go there all the time. Like I don't, it was it was overwhelming and it was a cool experience, but yeah, really overwhelming.
Yeah, New York's very cool, but like you said, it is overwhelming and there's so much going on. And
Mhm.
especially you have like this book that was like going out into the world at that time. So it must have just been like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, there's a picture of me. I just found it the other day. It's the morning that it came out. So it's May 2nd. And I'd asked my friends who had already had a few books come out, like, guys, what should I do this morning to like what should I do the day before we do this launch thing? And they recommended taking some time for myself. And so there's a picture of me at a coffee shop. Like I've got a croissant, which is my favorite food, and I've got a latte, which is my favorite coffee drink. And the caption is just trying not to lose my shit. And you can tell I look kind of like,
Yeah.
so yeah, that
That's that's so funny. But I
mhm.
think people really don't realize how much a debut novel, like the pressure that it like puts on you and all and how tiring it can be. So
Yeah,
congratulations. I mean,
thank
just
you.
on that part alone, because that's a huge feat. So yeah, that's awesome. And
Thank
I
you.
mean, you had there's you've talked a little bit about Bridget as a character, but are there any characters in the Unstoppable Bridget Bloom that you feel you relate to?
Um, I think all of them in times, because they're all from the inside of me, So like Bridget, I plucked some stories from my history to go into Bridget's story. Like she is a fat teen. I was a fat teen, and that felt really important for me to have that representation, kind of like a healing and homage for my younger self who really could have used a book where there was somebody who wore bigger clothes and took up more space in the world. But it wasn't about changing that. It was just about coming of age, living life, having friendships, so that was part of me. And also like the roommate situation with Ruby, that really happened in my life. And I was the Bridget in that situation. So I learned from that. But I'm still really good friends with that roommate. So 20 years later, so it all turned out okay. Um, Max, I share Max's love of Queen, and Freddie Mercury, very much so. Liza, I share actually her thing with like I would have never actually wanted to do musical theater like Bridget. I would think I would have been trying to bomb out like Liza is. Um, they all have a little bit of something, that feels relatable to me in some way.
I really like that because they're almost like your children. So they
They
all have
are like my children.
like a little piece of you, like something that is really yours. And I love how with Bridget, you really gave that representation and it came from a personal place. So it came so authentically. And I
Mhm.
think what you're writing is so important for readers and future readers. So I have to thank you for putting that kind of story out because I think it's going to mean a lot to people.
I hope so. I hope it does. And I hope that there's a reason that the author's note's in there because I just wanted people to understand the place that came from in me and how there are some things that Bridget gets to experience that are things that I really wish would have been the case for me in my teen years. So,
Yeah. And I think, like you said, it's so healing because you get to go back and kind of create this person
mhm.
that you would have wanted to be or would have wanted to be like. And I think
Yeah,
it's so amazing. And it is healing. It's like your inner child is
it
like
is. It does.
finally healing.
Yeah, you nailed it. I think it is like that. Like it's been in terms of even like I guess I would say like my own healing or self dialogue, even with my body image, because like being a girl is hard. I think, especially in our society, we're told all these things we're supposed to be and what they mean and the value they have. And I won't pull any punches about my relationship with my body and body image has been tumultuous
Mhm.
and still, even into like this phase of my life. And I've noticed shifts in myself in like my self respect and being kinder to myself no matter what my body is feeling like or looking like because as I wrote Bridget, I realized that I loved her consistently and wholly, just like just for who she is. And so I was like, oh, her body not matters not a goddamn thing to me, And so like I've been able to kind of apply that to myself. Like, okay, if Bridget's worthy of that kind of love from me, then I must be worthy of
Yeah,
that kind of love from me. And so was my younger self. And so yeah, it was a more cathartic book for me to write than I really thought it would be.
you have tears in my eyes right now. I
Oh,
love that. That I love that this book not only was able to be something helpful and healing for you, but the reason why you wrote it. So I think it's going to be a great representation. And these are the books that are going to do something like
I hope so. Of
for people. So again, thank you. And I mean,
course.
we've kind of talked about plans for a second book. So that's
Yeah.
going to be your original first book.
Yeah.
But is there anything you can say about that or any little
I
hints?
can.
Oh,
I can.
awesome.
Yeah. So it's slated to come out fall 2024, also with HarperCollins, Harper Teen. And tentatively, I think Sales and marketing sometimes likes to change titles, but I think I get to keep my title, which is Three Things About Emmy Crawford. And the premise is Emmy is a senior. She lives in DC. She is the daughter of a very prominent US senator who's actually going to make a run for president, and it's her mom. And Emmy's thing is she loves debate. She's very, very good at it. And she feels most comfortable and confident when she's winning and doing well at things because of the way that looks and the pride that it shows, like how it shines on her family, basically. Like it's important for her to look a certain way because her family's such like the limelight. And so she wants to make the national debate scene because that's just what she wants. And there's only really one other debater in DC who can even touch how good she is, and she falls for him. And problematically, so does her sister. And the other thing we have going on, so she's got all this stuff she's managing. There's paparazzi interference because they're such a high profile family. And she has Crohn's disease. And I have Crohn's disease. And so it's also about how do we manage this high profile life and these big ambitions, and then also a chronic illness alongside all of that.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so I have to say first, I love how you put the main characters' names in the title.
I'm
I
trying. I really hope they let me keep it because I kind of want that to be like a brand thing for my YA stuff.
Yeah, it's such like a good like introduction to the characters too. I love that. And I mean, I love how you put in so much of your personal life into these characters because I think what you're dealing with is so important for people to hear about, like education on Crohn's disease. I think
Mhm.
that's so important. And I think you're writing not only entertaining pieces, but such educational pieces. And I think that's awesome.
Thank you. I really wanted to find that balance regarding like it's not a book about what do I want to say? Shame about her disorder. She's very aware that she didn't do anything to get it, or like there's nothing inherent there. She's not broken. She's not a broken person. But it is hard to find a balance in being a person who really wants to work hard and be ambitious and kind of like ignore your disorder, kind of, which might be something that I've done many, many, many times in my life, versus when you really don't want to have like a sick role as like your identity. There's somewhere in the middle of that, but like it's really hard to find that equilibrium. And so I kind of wanted to show a teen struggling her way through that and at a point in her arc acknowledging, I don't want to look at this, but I need to look at this. Like this does affect my life. Her younger sister, Izzy, they're only like a year apart, has significant social anxiety. So that's also.
I'm loving this because I have a sister and we're only like a year apart.
Oh,
And it's funny because there was one time on the first day of school, we both came home. We're like, there's this boy and he's so cute. And we
uh-oh.
didn't know we were talking about the same person. And we
Oh
were,
no.
and we're like,
Yeah.
oh my
This
God,
might
we
speak to you.
yeah. So I'm excited to see because we had B last names and he had a B last name. So we both sat next
Oh.
to him in the class. So it was so funny. So I'm excited to see this or read this because it sounds like very relatable to me and my sister. And I think that's really cool.
Oh, I hope you do relate. Yeah.
Yes. I love when I have a book I can relate to. And one thing that I love doing when I'm writing is relating music to what I'm writing. So,
Yes.
did you create a playlist while writing Bridget's book for the entire book or any of the characters?
Yeah, it's like the most playlisty book I've ever written because it's such a music book and there's like actual music. Like there's when the kids are when the students are singing together, or when Bridget, her alarm clock plays Katy Perry Firework, and there's musicals referenced. So yeah, every single song that's referenced in the book anywhere, I put into a Spotify playlist, and it's a very long playlist actually. And then there's a couple of others that are in the playlist still that were in like previous drafts of the book, or that just make the book makes me think of that song. So yes, I 100% have a playlist.
I love that. And one other thing you did so well is you have such well-rounded characters. Do you have any tips for developing those?
Yeah. Thank you, by the way. That's really kind. I think that it really like I'm trying to think of how I write characters and how I do make them try to make them well rounded. I think we have to remember that storybook characters, even though it's fictional, they uh people are messy, like real life people, you and me and everybody I know, we have some kind of mess, you know, and I think that we need to have that somewhere on the page. Like characters can't act the same way all the time. Like I think we want to show them having some kind of personality or consistency, but they're always going to do like weird stuff, you know? So making sure that our characters aren't too clean or predictable, I think is useful. I like to think about my main characters, like where they've been and what made them who they are well before the story began. And so I usually do a lot of reflection or even some free writing about like what were the pivotal experiences in this character's life. And they've got, and this comes, some of this comes from on the shop right behind me. Lisa Cron's Story Genius is a really good craft book.
Okay.
So she kind of writes about how characters need to have misbeliefs. And then we kind of need to know the origin stories of the characters and where they developed those misbeliefs. And so I very much engage in that for my main characters when I'm writing them, because I kind of want to know what are they incorrectly interpreting about themselves or their world, and how did that come to be? And brains really like that, or at least that's Lisa Cron's argument, is that brains are wired for story, and story likes that kind of corresponding backstory. So definitely I'm doing that kind of exploration before I draft as well.
I have to say that's like again some really great advice because you don't hear what your brain would really like from a lot of people when you're writing.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
hearing kind of that and like the sense it was making that your brain likes the way you plan like that, it makes a lot of sense. And I think characters are like the driving force of these stories. So it's so important to like have a well-rounded characters and likable characters and even unlikable ones. But
Yes.
developing them are so important.
Yeah. I think this is probably from my background as a psychologist, or maybe even further back, the thing that made me want to be a psychologist. But like for me, I could invent characters all day. Like I love thinking about people and like what would be their quirks, or what was their background and what do they want. Like for me, the harder thing is plot. So and that's, I have, thank goodness my critique partners help me, and thank goodness I've read some really good craft books that help me. But like I love making characters. Figuring out where to put them, that's harder.
I mean, that was such great advice for the characters. And now, on like a more broad subject, what advice would you have for those who want to go into writing at all, like just any kind of writing, even?
Yeah. I guess I guess I have I have a million things I could say, but the two big things I would say are um if you want to like write seriously, like write novels or write screenplays, I think you really need to find some time in your schedule and protect it. If I didn't like plug the time literally into my Google Calendar and say, okay, it's these 2 hours, or it's you know, Thursday night, I am gonna try to write some after supper and put it on there. If I didn't do that, I would probably not prioritize the time to write, because I would find something else that needs to be done, like a parenting task, or something with my partner, or something around the house. You know, something else would always squeeze it out. But when I commit to it, I will go do it. And so I do think it's important to protect writing time. And it doesn't have to be, you know, people can make that work with whatever. It's harder when you work full time, or when maybe you're home with your kids full time. But like, even if it's like a half hour here or an hour here, that's still really good, and you can protect that.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, a really practical, important piece. And the second thing I would, well, okay, I'm actually going to say three things. The second thing I would say is that you have to be really freaking gritty if you want to get published, because, and I, everybody says this, but you truly do get rejected a lot. And even the yeses come with a lot of, you need to revise this, you need to do this character needs to go. And so you've got to create some kind of grit and some separation from your work. Like, you are not your work. Your work is your work. You are you. And so the rejection of your work is not a rejection of you. So it's grit and persistence. That is, anybody who's made it in publishing had those things, I guarantee you.
Mhm.
The third thing, and the thing I think helps with that grit and persistence, is I think having a community is really important. So even like my biggest community is my two, I've already talked about them once, but my two close critique partners, Laura Taylor Namey and Joan F. Smith. We literally talk every day. We've talked every day since we met basically back in 2017. We've visited each other now. We go to each other's launches. It's more than a critique group, it's a friend group now, but they read everything I write. I run all my ideas by them, like
Yeah.
and when I'm struggling or I'm disappointed or I'm feeling jealous of something that's happening for some other author, they're the people that I go to talk to about that. That stuff doesn't need to all go on me.
Yeah.
It's good to have a group for that kind of support.
Yeah, especially because some of the things you just listed, those are the feelings you don't always account for that you're
Yeah.
going to end up feeling, and then you end up feeling them. And I have to let you know, my brother, who's aspiring writer, my younger brother, I'm doing this in like my family room. While you were giving your tips, he literally stopped in his place and just listened to you
Oh,
and listened to all your tips. So just so you know, already they have helped one person. So
I'm so glad to know that. I hope they help.
yeah, I mean, they were great. And it's true, like finding people to surround yourself who are with the similar mindset. These are all important things to do. And it may seem daunting, and it is daunting to kind of get a break and a kick into the industry, but you can do it. As long as you have determination,
Mm-hmm.
it's possible. And I think your 3 tips also just underline that. So
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's that grit and willingness to grow. That's like the number one. And I think that's easier with a community. So,
yeah,
yeah.
that's so great. I mean, the main interview questions are done, but here
Okay.
at What's This Talking, we love to do hot seat questions. Are you down?
I'm ready.
Perfect. So one, a favorite character of yours, so one that you created.
In my book,
Yes. Or
Hans,
it can
it's,
Hans.
it's
That was
Hans.
like hands down Hans.
Yeah, it's Hans. And I know like my agent kind of wanted me to cut him. And I was like, no, that's the hill
Okay.
I die on. So Hans is very much like my grandpa. I just didn't realize that till after I'd written him. So
What about your favorite song at the moment?
okay, you prepared me for hot seat, but I had one. I'm just gonna look at my Spotify quick because
Sounds good.
I
I
want to get it.
never know my favorite songs off my top of my head.
I want to get it right. It is. I've been listening to it on repeat. Oh, it's from the Barbie movie. It's "Dance the Night" by Dua Lipa. I'm obsessed with Dua Lipa, and I love that song. It's so catchy. I just listen to it on repeat and dance in my minivan all the time right now.
I love that. Are you excited for the Barbie movie?
I am. I don't know if it wouldn't have been such a cultural phenomenon. I think I would have just been kind of like, but honestly, like everybody around me is so jazzed, especially about the Barbie Oppenheimer like double feature that I'm jazzed because I want to be part of this cultural movement with everybody. So yeah,
Same here. What about your all-time favorite book?
my favorite book is, well, for years it has been The Likeness by Tana French. I love that book. Lately though, there's this book called In 5 Years by Rebecca Searle, and I've read it 3 times within the last year. So I mean, it might be taken over. So those two.
Heard of either. I'll have to check them out.
Oh, they're so good.
They sound really good. You read them 3 times or the one 3 times in a year. That's crazy. But when
Yeah.
it's like a favorite book, it's easy to do that. So
Yes. Sometimes I'm just like, man, I really want to read that book again. I'll probably read it again in a few weeks. It's a sad book. It's a hard book, but it's kind of a comfort book for me for some reason. I don't know why.
what about your biggest inspiration?
Ooh. For writing or just like generally? Like
Either or. But
honestly, I think I get most inspired when I go on a walk. Um, and it's like when my brain wanders and I'll get like a good idea, and my critique partners and I call it the download. Like all of a sudden, all of these ideas and stuff starts flooding into my head. So yeah, walking or sometimes being in the shower. I know those are weird things for inspirations, but that's me.
what about your favorite place to write?
Usually coffee shops. I have one coffee shop particularly that I go to so much that I should probably pay rent to be there. It's really important for me to have light, and sometimes some chatter around me helps me as well. So definitely coffee shop girl.
I like that. I like coffee shops. They're so cute and like they're easy to sit down and start to write.
Absolutely.
Dogs or cats?
Both, but if I had to choose, probably dogs. I have two of each. So,
I'm a big dog person. I'm allergic to cats, but I have
oh,
two dogs too, so
mhm.
love
What
them.
kind of dogs do you have?
I have a golden retriever and then
Oh,
a schnauzer poodle mix called a
oh,
Schnoodle,
that's so cute. Well, all dogs, I'd be like, that's so cute because I'm
right?
obsessed with dogs.
What about you? What kind do you have?
They're both rescues, so they're kind of mutts, but Maple is she's definitely a beagle, but probably like a beagle pointer mix, we think. And then Rosie is like your guess is as good as mine. She looks like every dog and no dog I've ever seen. So
Oh,
she's like this little weird dog.
oh my God, I love that. Rosie and Maple.
Yeah.
Those are so cute names. Love them. I have a Molly and a Henry, and then I'm
Oh,
actually getting a puppy next week.
oh, what kind of puppy?
A golden doodle.
Oh, so
So
cute.
yeah, we haven't decided on a name quite yet, but she should be interesting.
Oh, puppies. Good luck to you, friend.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm sure it will be fun but busy.
Yeah. What about your go-to Starbucks order?
So lately I've been obsessed with the sweet cream vanilla cold brew. Just can't get enough. I drink it and I'm like, this is so good.
Yes, I love the sweet cream vanilla cold brew. What about daytime or nighttime?
I've become a daytime person, I would say in the last 10 years, probably. Little kid, total night owl, and I still stay up too late, but man, I like it when the sun's out.
How about a vacation or a staycation?
100% vacation.
You need to get
Love,
away.
love to travel. Yep.
I agree. And reading or writing?
That one's so hard. And when I read these, I was like, ah. Um, I would say actually most of the time reading. I love to read and get swept away. But when I'm really in the midst of drafting something new, then it's gonna be writing.
Sometimes it's so bad because I love to write, but I also love to read. And when other people have done the work to get me
Mm-hmm.
a story, I'm like, well, maybe I'll be a little lazy today and just read instead. But I don't
Yeah.
know. It's so hard to pick between the two.
And I don't know about you, but my brain gets when I'm like writing a lot or revising a lot, my brain is like really tired. And so then I struggle to read as like with as much or for as long as I do when I'm not actively drafting, because then I'll read
Yeah.
a lot more.
Yeah, no, definitely. That makes it so hard.
Mhm.
Well, Allison, thank you so much for joining me today. This was such a great conversation. And I mean, you were phenomenal. And I hope everyone goes out and reads The Unstoppable Bridget Bloom.
I mean, I hope so too. Thank you so much for having me on. I was so overjoyed to get this request, and it's been so fun to just sit and talk with you. And yeah, thank you so much for reaching out.